13 years. It is her second career. Um, and she's very passionate about her work. She's worked for Riverside for 6.5 or 6 years now, almost as long. About 6 months into me starting the business, I met Rhiannon, and it was serendipity for sure, because I was looking for someone like her. She was looking to get into this field, and our children were on the same sports teams, and we met, and it was just really perfect. So Rhiannon started off in the company as a care manager. She didn't have that experience at working in this capacity, and she learned really quickly. She formed wonderful bonds with her clients and really grew into the role. And then just over a year ago, we promoted her to director of care management because it was the natural fit, and it was definitely the right time, because she really is amazing as a care manager. And so one of the things Rhiannon was passionate about, or has been increasingly passionate about, especially since the pandemic, is alternative treatments. And, we see all too often clients who have polypharmacy, way too many medications, and all the side effects those bring. And there were just so many missing pieces that medicine couldn't help with. And so Rhiannon sought out alternative treatments, and really, I can remember her sending me one of the Netflix, there was a whole Netflix series on alternative medicine and treatments. And so she really got passionate about it. And then she went back and became a certified cannabis health coach and educator, and has just put her all into it, and is really bringing value into the practice and into our clients' lives by teaching them, helping them, guiding families, and teaching them about cannabis and the role that it plays and how it's very helpful in the population that we serve. So tonight she's going to give you some background information about cannabis and get you up to speed on some of the history. It's fascinating. So I hope you enjoy it. And let us know if you have any questions, just stick them in the chat, and I'll be sure to flag Rhiannon and make sure she sees them. Okay.
All
Turn it
right.
over
So
to you.
thank you, Jennifer. And so I'll go ahead and get started. So just wanted to let you know a couple of different affiliations. I am also a member of the American Cannabis Nurses Association. This is where I get my continuing education and up-to-date information on cannabis. And I also received my certification from Holistic Caring. And then I am also an advocate for Green Compass CBD, which is a very high quality product that I recommend. And then I also belong to a group called Nurses with a Mission. I get a lot of mentorship from nurses that have been doing this cannabis work for 5 or longer years, and their mission is also to educate the community, healthcare professionals, and they help to develop this presentation together with me that I'm showing you today. Just a little disclaimer here. I have to say that these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, and this product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So now that's all cleared up. Here we are, plant medicine, balancing the system. The history of cannabis in the US is today's topic. And we'll also talk about the endocannabinoid system, as well as how it applies to the aging population as well. So this graphic here is one of my favorites. When we remove the shame from using cannabis, it opens up conversations that can be truly life-changing. And I have to say, before I learned all this information myself, I have to say that I think I was part of the stigma. I didn't realize, I think without knowing all the history and about the endocannabinoid system, I think a lot of us have this as well, maybe without even realizing it. So here's our agenda. We did our introductions and our goal. We'll talk about hemp history, politics, and the timeline. We'll also talk about the endocannabinoid system and how it applies to the aging population. We'll also talk a little bit about different modes of, how to use cannabis and how to talk to your healthcare professional about it as well. So our primary goal to demystify the root of the stigma surrounding cannabis in the US. And the main question we'll answer together is, why has this plant been so demonized, and why is this important? So what is all the buzz about this plant? So let's set the stage. So over 10,000 years ago, cannabis use in Chinese culture was documented in pottery, paintings, and also carbon-14 dating. Cannabis became pervasive among nomadic tribes throughout Central Asia, who then traveled to the Middle East and also Eastern Europe. Historically, hemp was cultivated and made into food, fuel, fiber, and medicine to treat sickness in people and also in animals. It has so many different uses. There's 50,000 documented uses of hemp. It was made into ropes, nets, and sails for ships. And colonial capitalism and the slave trade facilitated the introduction of cannabis to the Americas. So here's just some fun, interesting facts. The North American Indians were actually responsible for introducing tobacco to the British colonists, and it was the British colonists that introduced cannabis to the North American Indians. The British had a great interest in the economic versatility of hemp, and it was actually in 1619 in the US, it was Virginia law actually required those that were landowners to grow hemp. It was mainly for fiber. And again, because it had so many documented uses. So hemp was used to feed livestock. It was made into clothing, paper, fuel, and it also was used for heating and also machinery. So if you think about it, it was in our food chain. So, the animals were eating it. We were wearing it on our bodies as clothing. So it's kind of interesting to think about that. And now, as time went on, that went away and it was no longer the case. So some more fun facts: from 1850 through 1937, cannabis was listed in the pharmacopoeia to treat over 100 separate illnesses and diseases. And the pharmacopoeia is basically today's physician desk reference. It's the single reference that all medical professionals refer to when looking at the efficacy and use of any medicines. There were 2,000 preparations and 280 different manufacturers of cannabis at that time. And I think these little tinctures here, these are like real tinctures that were used, or the little old bottles. And if you look at some of them closely, they're kind of interesting combinations here, like alcohol, cannabis indica, chloroform, morphine sulfate. It's kind of interesting to look at that. So, so also cannabis obviously was historically a staple of medicinal therapy, as shown by this book. And another fun fact, which is sort of a sad fact, is that despite the once integral place that cannabis held in our formulary for treating illness, in this, a recent survey revealed that only 21 of the 157 medical schools surveyed actually teach the endocannabinoid system or teach about cannabis to our future doctors. That means just 13% of newly educated physicians in the US are learning about cannabis today. And that's why, a lot of times when you approach your doctor or approach doctors today, a lot of them don't know about it and don't know how to guide you on it at all. And so some of them don't recommend it because they aren't educated on it. We're hoping some of that is changing as we move along here, and more healthcare providers are starting to educate themselves. And I'm hoping to help with that as well. So we're here to help basically understand why this happened and why cannabis went from being in every household in many forms to being illegal. So these are the major players, the major historical players that essentially had a lot to do with cannabis being taken away. So a wise person once told me, if you want to uncover an enigma, you should follow the money trail. And so this doctor, Dr. Jack Lamb, he's a medical doctor who could no longer deny the success his patients were having on their own with the use of cannabis. So he decided to educate himself on the plant, and his mind was blown. And he too was like, why don't I know more about this? And so he looked into it a little bit further and found this information. And it had a lot to do with politics. So here are some of the major political players that you'll find on the money trail that led to the prohibition of cannabis in this country. And you probably recognize a couple of these names like Rockefeller and Carnegie. The other two may not be as familiar, but they're all very extremely powerful men in their time. And the first three of these men were extremely wealthy, and really they were the richest of the rich at the time. So Rockefeller, he owned the largest petroleum company in the world, Standard Oil Company, and now you'll know it as ExxonMobil and Chevron. He's against hemp ethanol as a fuel because it's a threat to his empire. And he's heavily invested also in pharmaceuticals and in the new era of modern medicine, which we refer to as a pill for an ill. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the pill for an ill is in a little bit. And Carnegie, he's actually the steel magnate. So he led the American expansion of the steel industry, which included railroads, automotive industry, and he actually saw Henry Ford and his Model T that was manufactured out of hemp as competition. I thought that was fascinating that Henry Ford had a Model T that was manufactured out of hemp and actually fueled by hemp as well. So this man, he funded the Flexner Report. So herb and hemp-based treatments were pushed aside for a pill for an ill. So a little bit more about what a pill for an ill philosophy is. So it's basically when you go to your doctor nowadays, right? And when you go to your doctors, you're expecting to leave with a prescription. And if you don't, you kind of feel like you weren't served. It's what we expect these days, right? And it wasn't always like that. And really, like, why is it like that now? So Rockefeller and Carnegie Foundation funded the Flexner Report. And Dr. Flexner, he traveled across the country and he looked at how doctors were practicing medicine at the time in the US. And both Rockefeller and Carnegie, as I previously mentioned, were heavily interested in the pharmaceutical world. And there was a personal interest in seeing the pharmaceutical method of healthcare survive in this new era of medicine. And so this is when plant-based treatments really began to be kind of pushed aside. And then we have William Hearst. So he is the newspaper magnate at the time. So kind of like the CNN and the Fox News that we have now. And newspapers at that time were made out of wood. And so he saw hemp as a threat because it was a lower cost alternative. And he was the one that was controlling the media outlets with his newspaper. And his role was very pivotal in the misinformation campaign to demonize cannabis. And then Harry Anslinger, he's the first commissioner of the US Treasury Department of Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And he served 5 presidents, so he was around for a long time, and his influence was around for a long time. He was essentially kind of like the present DEA. He was appointed by the US Secretary of the Treasury at the time, Richard Mellon of Mellon Bank. And Mellon had sizable investments in all of the aforementioned industries. He was a big supporter of alcohol prohibition as well as cannabis prohibition. And so when alcohol prohibition ended, he really needed something else, like another public enemy to continue his funding source. So that's when he really started to back cannabis prohibition. And then he took his show on the road, and he actually went around the world, really just trying to convince other governments in the world to adopt the same policies, demonizing cannabis, and that were eventually adopted here in the US. So DuPont is also another important player. So I think probably most of you have heard of DuPont. They're the world's largest producer of chemicals. The DuPont brothers from France developed synthetic fibers, including cellophane, Teflon, Lycra, and DuPont was also backed by Mellon Bank. So this is a picture painted by a handful of very powerful men whose growing industries were threatened by cannabis. So their influence on our political system led to the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. And this act really solidified the end of cannabis use in the US. It was very racially motivated, a masterful smear campaign that made people believe that cannabis was evil and used by heathens. And unfortunately, the physicians at the time that had used cannabis for so long, for so many things, they tried to really overcome this agenda, but they weren't able to do that because of the politics at that time. And many politicians were not even aware that hemp was lumped into this policy and so voted for its criminalization. This act taxed marijuana and hemp out of practical use. And so also an interesting fact. So marijuana is actually a derogatory slang word used to demonize the plant and perpetuate its racism. And the proper term is cannabis, and that's the word we'll use throughout the rest of this this presentation. This just shows a little bit more about this smear campaign that they had going. Just shows they were showing these movies and had posters kind of posted up everywhere or in the newspapers. It's just kind of interesting to read some of what this says: weird orgies, wild parties. They just really made it sound like only the worst of the worst did this. And then comes along the Controlled Substance Act in 1970. So the act categorized marijuana right alongside heroin, LSD, and PCP as a Scheduled 1, which it still is to this day. Schedule 1 means there's no medical benefits and it's highly abusive, and which makes it nearly impossible to study to this day in the US. So over 40 more years go by where cannabis is absent from our culture. And then finally, the winds of change begin to blow. And has anybody heard of the Farm Bill by now? It's officially called the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018. And this is the bill that legalized hemp and authorized the production of hemp and removed hemp and hemp seeds from the DEA's schedule of controlled substances. So this essentially allowed farmers to start growing hemp, and it really helped to improve, the ability for farmers to do this, and then also really gave the ability and the regulation and framework around the production of hemp throughout the U.S. And the establishment of hemp as a regulated commodity also paved the way for U.S. hemp farmers to participate in other USDA farm programs as well. So it's great for agriculture in the country along with other industries. So this was finally something politicians could sign on to. So this is a great timeline. It comes from the American Cannabis Nurses Association website on legalization laws. So as you can see here, in 1996, California was the first to legalize. You see here, Massachusetts in 2012. That's when it was legalized medically. And then in 2016, Massachusetts legalized it recreationally. Also, New Hampshire, 2013, was legal medically, and still now it's just only medically legal. Unfortunately, there's still a couple states, Arizona and South Dakota, that it's not legal at all in those states, unfortunately. Hopefully that changes soon. So where are we now? So as of August 8th of 2023, there's currently 26 states and territories, including DC, Guam, and the US Virgin Islands, where marijuana or cannabis is recreational legal. And we have 41 states, including Washington, DC, and Puerto Rico, where it's medically legal. So it's much of the US where it is accessible now. It's just kind of an overview of the timeline of cannabis. And actually, really interestingly, so this references, so in 1920, cannabis extracts were all marketed by Merck, Bristol Myers Squibb, Park Davis, and Eli Lilly. I'm sure they're all names that you all would recognize. So let's talk a little bit about cannabis, the plant itself, and kind of the differences between hemp and marijuana, or we'll call it high THC cannabis. So CBD, or that comes from hemp, which is non-impairing. So that grows naturally and only has on average about 0.3% THC. And the THC is what makes cannabis impairing. And that 0.3% would not be enough to impair anybody. So that's non-psychoactive. And then the higher THC cannabis that can contain, on average, anywhere between 15 to 20%, sometimes upwards of 40%. Some of the, that's the thing, some of the dispensaries sell some of these really high percentage THCs, and kind of that's where sometimes people get in trouble. It's legal, and I think a lot of older adults and just people in general are going into these dispensaries, don't have any guidance, and are taking these high THC products, and unfortunately it can be, they can have a negative experience and then never want to try it again. Or sometimes people using really high THC products can have that hyperemesis syndrome where they're vomiting, and that syndrome is really, that comes from using very high THC products. Does anybody have any questions about that? All right, I'll continue. All right, so the endocannabinoid system. So really, this is kind of the meat of how cannabis works in our bodies. And when I learned about this during my my certification, I was totally blown away. I had been to nursing school and never learned about an entire body system that exists because it wasn't taught. And it's not taught in a lot of nursing schools or medical schools, unfortunately, but I think it's starting to change. I actually reached out to my own nursing school that I went to, and apparently they're starting to teach it. So that's good news. So the endocannabinoid system is the master regulatory system that influences and balances the function of every body system. So it's referred to, again, as the master or universal regulatory of the body because its main function is to help regulate and balance out all of the other body system. So it is, in fact, it's an integral part of all mammals, nervous systems, and is responsible for a wide variety of vital functions. And so as you can see here on the screen, so it's kind of small, but it essentially, we have receptors on every single body part in our bodies. So the endocannabinoid system is everywhere in our body. And really that is why cannabis can work and help with so many different things. So like, mood and sleep, our pain perception, our digestive systems, our immune health, stress response, inflammation, anxiety, and a lot more. The cannabis plant contains more than 100 different compounds or cannabinoids. So Dr. Meshulam, he was an Israeli chemist. He was the one that discovered the chemical structure of THC. He and his team learned it is just one of many cannabis molecules. And then the late 1980s, he and other teams from the NIH found that there were G protein coupled receptors that are activated by cannabinoids like CBD and THC. So as you can see here on the screen, CBD, so this would be a depiction of the hemp plant. And so a good portion of it is CBD, but there are all these other compounds in molecules that are in it as well. So endocannabinoids, that's what we have inside of us. And those are molecules produced naturally within our own bodies. That's anandamide and 2-AG. And then there are the phytocannabinoids, which are found in the cannabis plant. And so we get those and we can use them to supplement deficiencies in our own bodies. And then there's also synthetic cannabinoids. You may have heard of those. Those are Epidiolex, Marinol, and Sativex. So the thing though about the synthetic cannabinoids, they don't work quite in the same way because they're very specific compounds or chemicals that are made. And when you're using the plant, you're getting all of these other naturally, producing molecules as well. So it's, I think, much more beneficial to utilize the plant itself because all of these different compounds work together synergistically in your body. So this is just one of many graphics you can Google to get a graphic presentation of the CB1 and CB2 receptors that are found in our body, but also a largely elementary depiction of our lock and key system signal that may happen when a plant or a phytocannabinoid like THC or CBD interacts with these receptors. So to the right, you can see here, so anandamide, that's what we have in our own bodies, in our endocannabinoid system. And THC is what is found obviously in the plant. And as you can see, they look very similar. And this is why that we can use it as a supplement in our body and our bodies recognize it. So CBD works a little bit differently around the receptor sites by helping the body stimulate production of more of our own endogenous endocannabinoids, but it also helps to limit the breakdown of it. So again, it's less important to know exactly how they connect or work with the receptors, and more important just to know that they help to fill gaps in our endocannabinoid system. And we get many good benefits from this. And so here we see our own natural endocannabinoid system. So here on the left, the anandamide and 2-AG. And, we already talked about how moment to moment, they're creating balance in all of our body systems. And then when we see on the right here is the different stressors that we're under on a daily, that our bodies are under stress on a daily basis. So mental stress, environmental, changes, physical stress. So pollutants, if we're eating foods that are processed, all of those types of things can really deplete our endocannabinoid system and really can cause significant dysfunction over time. And our bodies are amazing. They can kind of shift and try to, make adjustments, but after a period of time, they're just not able to make those adjustments anymore. And so having the supplement can help with that a lot. So there are other things too that we can do to help our endocannabinoid system. It's not just the plant. Science and research is also showing that there are also other things that we can do, like yoga and meditation. It's making sure that we keep hydrated, getting good sleep, maybe, if you're in a dysfunctional relationship or a dysfunctional job, getting out of that, and really just making sure that we're taking good care of ourselves and paying attention, making time for ourselves, and doing other things too, like massage and just getting good exercise and hydration and rest. So this just talks a little bit more about what I was saying, just being able to support the endocannabinoid system, doing all of these things like, eating good whole foods, adaptogens and supplements, getting regular exercise, stress management. Here, utilizing mind-body medicine as well, getting a massage or using aromatherapy, acupuncture, essential oils. And then also it's so important, social connection is really important as well. And so making sure we're taking time to get together with our favorite people, our friends, people that, make us feel good, laughing, hugs, those are all things that feed our endocannabinoid system. And so cannabis is just one of many tools. All right, we'll talk specifically a little bit about cannabis and how its benefits for older adults. So the proportion of older adults over the age of 65 using cannabis as medicine has really been rising over the past few years, and for good reason. This is a population really that can benefit a lot from cannabis's pleiotropic properties and its power to yield the across the board benefits for numerous conditions that are common in aging. There was a report done, a CNN report done in 2020, surveyed 15,000 seniors on cannabis use, and they found that cannabis use doubled between 2015 and 2018. Now that more recently too, I kind of updated the slide this just past February. They found that over 12% of seniors now between the ages of 50 to 80 have been using cannabis. And this, I just want to point this out. It's, there's so many people, again, that are utilizing cannabis as medicine, but some of them are not getting appropriate guidance and talking to their healthcare professionals about it. And, as older adults, they're utilizing, or they're on many different medications. They have complicated healthcare issues. So it's really important to make sure that that they do get guidance and that they are talking to their doctors about this as well. And so with aging, it's obviously associated with a lot of deteriorating medical conditions such as neurodegenerative disorders leading to dysregulations in the body. And this just talks a little bit about how our endocannabinoid system relates to different diseases. So for example, the levels of anandamide and 2-AG, those are found to be increased in Parkinson's patients. In Alzheimer's disease, the FAAH gene is regulated by our endocannabinoid system. It's found to be higher in Alzheimer's patients. And then also the lack of the CB2 cannabinoid receptors has been linked with schizophrenia-like pathologies. So research is really aiming there to learn more about what comes first here. Is it the dysfunction of the endocannabinoid system that causes it, or is it a genetic flaw that causes the changes in the ECS? So either way, really, the body of evidence suggests that there is a neurobiological role of the ECS in the aging process, especially with sleep disturbances. This slide talks about the various pharmaceuticals, and this is near and dear to me. For all of our clients, I like to review their medication lists, and I see more and more often that our seniors are coming in to us with 10 or more medications. And then I utilize something called the Beers list, which is a list of pharmaceuticals that often do more harm than good for patients that are older than 75 and have other healthcare issues. So really, the seniors are a challenge to medicine, really, because of their accumulating health conditions and the pharmaceuticals needed to treat them. And so we have to make sure we're taking a look at all of these medicines. So aging also causes an increase in insomnia, pain, anxiety, hypertension. So all of these things. And, as they're having more issues, doctors and their specialists are prescribing more and more medications. And aging also causes a decrease. So they're not able to really absorb in the same way that a younger person does, or excrete in the same way, because their renal and liver clearance usually is not functioning the way it used to. And so the bioavailability of prescriptions, can be much higher, and then can cause a lot of other side effects, including toxicity. And a lot of that shows up as, dizziness, nausea, confusion. I mean, I think falls is a really big one. I think a lot of seniors are having falls, due to some of these side effects from medications. So it's important we take a look at some of these things. So the other thing too, with learning more about cannabis and how it works in the body, and after time in utilizing it, that patients couldn't actually see the option to decrease some of the medications that they're on, because the cannabis is helping balance, their systems out, and helping their bodies do what they need to do. So they may not need to be on some of the medications any longer, or they may be able to decrease the medications. Obviously, we definitely have to do that in conjunction with your doctor. And it's really important that if you start to take cannabis or CBD, that you're letting your doctor know, and that, you're, following up and doing regular labs as well. So that's important to do. All right, so older adults obviously also have the most to gain with cannabis. It can simultaneously improve peace of mind with the aging process, can reduce pain and inflammation, and strengthen bones to ward off osteoporosis. And those with bone-on-bone pain feel the lessening of inflammation, as well as reduced pain signaling. So this can bring improvements in mobility and the ability to take a daily walk. And low doses of cannabis can improve cognition, focus, engagement, and over time, there may be a decrease in insomnia, depression, anxiety, isolation, and fear of dying. And then in SSRIs and antipsychotics and benzodiazepines, which are these common medications that we see a lot of our older adult population on, especially those with Alzheimer's or dementia, they don't really tend to work well in elders, and they're not meant for they're only meant for short-term use, not really to be on long-term. And really, this population needs lifelong help. So this is another study. AARP published a review in their September 2019 bulletin covering everything seniors need to know about medical marijuana. And Dr. Peter Greenspoon of Harvard Medical School was quoted, "It makes sense to try cannabis when you consider the track record of other medications older adults take, especially for pain, sleep, and anxiety." So NSAIDs like Motrin and Aleve, they affect the kidneys, the heart, and they can cause GI bleeds. Opiates really are not effective for long-term use at all. Obviously, they can be addictive and cause constipation. And then the hypnotics and benzodiazepines, they're cause a lot of sedation, and they very negatively affect memory, as well as can cause falls. And then at Harvard University, Dr. Stacy Gruber, and she's also practices at McLean Hospital. She's doing a study called the MIND study. She's a neuroscientist studying older adults using cannabinoids through observational data. And she found that mental focus sharpened after 3 months of medical marijuana use, leading to more activation in their cingulate cortex, which is an important brain area involved with paying attention, avoiding distractions, and problem solving. And researchers found improved neuroimaging scans revealing normalization of brain function that matched the improvement in cognitive skills. And so the question is why? Why is it? Because, is it because people are feeling less pain, they're sleeping better, or is it because there's fewer medications that they need to take, like the opiates and benzodiazepines that alter thinking and memory, or is it a direct effect of the cannabis? And they're not really sure yet. They're still, doing these studies to see. And I just wanted to mention too that Jennifer and I recently had a Zoom call with one of Dr. Stacy Gruber's clinical assistants, and they're doing a clinical trial. Currently, this MIND trial is still going on, and they're actively recruiting patients that have anxiety and agitation and Alzheimer's and dementia. So if you know anybody that, would want to participate in that, feel free to reach out to us. All right, so this is just talks again about the 2018 Farm Bill. Really cannabis with 0.3% or less THC, it's considered hemp. It's now recognized and protected for insurance purposes and for interstate travel and so much more. And the reason for massive uptick in the production and sales of CBD products in the US since the signing of this bill in January 2019. So you're seeing CBD everywhere. It's being sold, I think, even in gas stations and CVS, but it's important. Unfortunately, it's a really unregulated market. So it's really important that you know where your CBD is coming from and that it's, a high quality product. So just want to talk about a little bit about how to vet a good product. And that goes for CBD or for, other cannabis products. So you want to look for a certificate of analysis. Any product, well, if you find a product and it doesn't have a certificate of analysis, you definitely don't want to buy that. So that product should specify, usually you can just scan it and it'll bring up a report. And the product should specify the total amount of the CBD or cannabis content and also provide, other specific ingredients that are in it. It should tell you how it's extracted. And the best way, the most environmentally friendly way for extraction is to use CO2 extraction. You also want to make sure that It comes from clean soil. It's best to buy a USDA organic product because you certainly don't want to be taking something that has a bunch of pesticides in it. And then it's better to buy something that's a whole flower product. So some products utilize the entire plant, so they use stalks and stems. It's much better quality if you're getting just the flower, because that's where all the medicine is. And then if you're buying a tincture, it's best, coconut oil is a very good carrier. So that's also a good thing to look for. I'm going to just stop here for a second and just see if anybody has any questions about any of that. No? All right. And now just want to talk a little. Somebody have a question?
Yeah,
Sarah?
this is Sarah. Yeah, and I'm sorry.
Sure.
The reason kind of what drew me to this lecture too is just my frustration with the meds that are out there for seniors. A lot of them are off label. They're not FDA approved.
Right.
Romarin's very old school. So I I appreciate you providing this lecture with something that's newer, because I get frustrated in terms of advocacy for geriatrics. Why are there not more meds out there that are more current and with clinical studies? And maybe you two can comment if you also have those frustrations. So yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, I know I work with many of our clients that are prescribed, antipsychotics. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that when it comes to especially like Alzheimer's and dementia, and they're trying to help, with controlling anxiety or behaviors, there's nothing out there that's indicated for that population at all. And so the doctors have just been utilizing what's available. Like I know a lot of times we see medications like, Seroquel or olanzapine. Those are like probably the most common, or Ativan, but unfortunately, those medications, they have black box warnings. They also have a lot of negative side effects and can negatively affect cognition themselves. So yeah, I am also very frustrated, Sarah. That's definitely a part of the reason why I educated myself further on this, because I just thought there has to be some better way to help, to help these people. And so, yeah, and I think to me, it just makes so much more sense to start with something that's plant-based. CBD and cannabis has far fewer side effects than a lot of these other medications. So it makes a lot of sense to start with something like that. Unfortunately, I think, for us, a lot of our clients have been sick for many, many years and, are coming to us now. And, I am helping several of our clients with this, and it can take a while, it's not something that happens overnight. And I think a lot of people sometimes think, well, I can start taking cannabis and it's going to just help me, the first time I take it, or it's going to help me within a couple of days. Cannabis is something that needs to be used. You have to think of it like a supplement. And so it's really important that you take it, on a consistent basis. And, you have to give it at least a good, I always tell people now, don't even bother trying it unless you can commit to using it for a good 2 to 3 months. And usually some people, start to see benefits after, a couple of weeks. But some people you have to utilize it for a longer period of time before you can really start to see the benefits. But I know, I definitely know multiple people at this point and have helped, multiple clients that it's definitely making significant differences. And also working with a lot of the other cannabis nurses and talking with a lot of other people that are working in this space now, that, you can really see significant benefits. Does
What do
anybody
you
else?
do?
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead, Deb.
I was just going to say, what is the process of taking elderly people off of regular meds and trying to introduce this?
That's a slow, I think, I would say you add the CBD or cannabis first. And then after a period of time, so for example, I will just use this as an example.
You can use my mother as an example.
No, I don't need to do that.
I'm like, she's
But
got.
I would just use an
I love your
general
mother.
example. So I would say, let's say somebody has high blood pressure, okay, and they're on multiple blood pressure medications. We add cannabis to their regimen, and they're taking it regularly. And, you monitor, blood pressures just in general, or like, they go to their doctors and they get their regular checkups and they notice all of a sudden, oh, your blood pressure is lower, it's lower now. So now we can, take away one of those blood pressure medications potentially, right? And it's something that happens gradually, or maybe you're decreasing the dose of one of the blood pressure medications. Same thing with, like an antipsychotic or an anti-anxiety medication. If you're noticing you're not so anxious anymore, or you could also just start to decrease it slowly. And I always say, we do this in conjunction with the doctor and have a conversation with the doctor about it. And that's why I always say too, it's important when you go in to see your doctor that you let them know, I'm taking CBD now, or I'm taking cannabis now. And, hopefully your doctor is, on board with having the conversation and will help you with this. And if they're not, it might be time to find a new doctor, I would say, potentially.
And I think, Rhiannon, you've had success with just asking the questions to physicians. Do you really think they need to still be on this medicine? Not that you're saying it that way exactly, but basically asking, what do you think about reducing? Could we maybe reduce something? Could we maybe take this back? And I think that doctors seem to be receptive to that, but they're not going to do that unless the patient or the advocate for the patient asks. That's been our experience. They don't just do it. And the other thing I just want to say quickly, Sarah, because you brought it up, is that many of the so we all know there's such a shortage in primary care doctors, right? I mean, there's such a shortage. So there's even more of a shortage of primary care doctors who understand geriatric medicine. So like there's family practice, right? Like that's what you see the most. Everybody's family practice. So they don't know. I mean, they know like the overview, but they have their hands in so many different buckets that sometimes this is not what they're doing all day long. So they just, go to these different medications. But one PCP, if someone has a behavior, will always go to Seroquel, but then the other one does gabapentin or whatever it is. They get on these tracks, but it's because they really don't they don't just focus on geriatrics. And unfortunately in this country, especially in New England, you would think, but there's just no geriatricians. I mean, there's very few. So they just don't specialize in geriatric medicine. I think that's what it is. That's the biggest problems.
And the thing too with the medications is that they don't have a lot of time. The primary care physicians don't have much time with the patients. So they don't even go there to talk about, taking them off their meds. So you really have to be proactive and advocate with that.
Have you had experience with pain meds and like getting people off of pain meds or?
So yes, I mean, I haven't personally had success in getting patients off of pain medications, but I do know that, so number one, that CBD or cannabis can be used together with pain medications, and it can actually work. They actually work together with them so that it can work better. But I do also know of people that have been able to get off or significantly decrease their pain medications with the addition of cannabis. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. In fact, in my mother, I'd be happy to add it on because somebody who had, who was on opioids for so long,
Yeah.
prescribed opioids for so long, and now she's on what, like Tylenol?
Yeah, she's not right, not much, but
Yeah,
gabapentin. I mean, gabapentin is also a big. It's a very. I feel like it's very overprescribed. I see a lot of our clients on gabapentin, and it's yeah. So
I'm confused by that one because I give it to my dog for anxiety, not pain.
yeah, so
Well,
it's
that's
actually
the thing.
So I'm
Used
totally
for both.
confused
can
about
be
that
used
one.
for both of those things, and I think that's
Yeah.
a lot of times why doctors use it, because a lot of the patients that have a lot of pain also have anxiety, and so they use it for both. But some
Yeah.
people are on these really high doses, and that's a medication. You can't really just take it away. Usually it needs to be titrated. But and I will say, Deb, that I helped to advocate and got your dad off some of the medications he was on. So
Thank God. I think they just like to collect medications, prescriptions.
They're not the only ones.
No,
you know?
yeah, and it can be so confusing. They're on, especially if they're on so many different medications, chances are they're not taking them correctly. And they're interacting. If you're on
That's what I worry about.
meds, if you're on 5 or more meds, they're interacting with each other, most likely. So
You're taking one to fix the side effect of another one, and then
Yep.
another one causes this side effect, then you take this, and then
yep.
we've seen that. Rhiannon and I have seen it multiple times where you don't even know what's causing it. Is it a medication side effect? Is it the disease process? So
Right.
it's impossible to tell once you start layering on the meds.
So we'll just talk a little bit about just different delivery methods. We just got a couple more slides left here, and because I know we're at 8:05, and so it's best to really stack 2 or more delivery methods. It's kind of, you get the best results the quickest. So there's really 3 major delivery methods that I'll talk about. So water soluble, so cannabis compounds that are taken up into the body, which is made mostly of water quickly. And that can be found in the gummy type edibles or tinctures. And you just want to be, cautious, as many companies don't use safe manufacturing processes. Sublingual, so these are the tinctures. The tinctures are great because you can use very small amounts, or you can titrate it really easily. So maybe take a little bit more or a little bit less. You'll want to take those underneath the tongue, and you let it sit there for a good 60 seconds so it can absorb under your tongue. It's also good to take these with a little bit of food. So like a little bit of fat, maybe like, an avocado, or like just something, not like a major meal or anything, but just something little. And then also topicals. There's a lot of different creams and salves that you can use, roll-ons. And those are good for, I have a pain in my shoulder or in my knees or something like that. And it's best if you use it together with, also taking, maybe the gummy or the tincture, and kind of works better together. So again, I just say that really a consistent routine is key. And then really committing to trying this at least a good 2 to 3 months before deciding if it's working for you or not. And then it's also very important to get guidance from a knowledgeable professional on products and also dosing strategies. So there's all different ratios of products. So you can get them that have both CBD and THC together. I think, that's the best route. But also there are all these other, you can do CBN or CBG, and they all have different kind of benefits. And you can add those in as well. I'm not going to get too much in detail about all the individual ones here, but just know that there are different options as well. And then just talking to your provider about cannabis. We already kind of touched on that, but it's, I think it's really important. A lot of people are hesitant to tell their doctors when they go to their doctor's offices that they're taking cannabis. And again, this is because of the stigma, right? But it's important that they know, number one, so that, they realize that you're doing it. And then also, if you're telling them and you're getting benefits from it, they'll realize it as well, that it can be used and is used for medicine. And providers need really to learn about cannabinoids. There's 30,000 plus studies on PubMed. ProjectCBD.org is a really great site to kind of check out. There's a wealth of resources, information on there, and a ton of studies on CBD and cannabis that you can find. And really your provider should support your wishes and be an advocate, not a judge. Just some closing thoughts here from a couple of amazing men. One of them is Raphael Mechoulam. He's the father of cannabis research. Says, I believe cannabinoids represent a medical treasure waiting to be discovered. And then the second from Dr. Ethan Russo, who's still very active in research to this day. Cannabis is the single most versatile herbal remedy and the most useful plant on earth. No other single plant contains as wide a range of medically active herbal constitutes. Just to recap, I'm not going to read all that again. And just are some of the work cited. So knowledge is power. And I thank you all for joining us. Happy to answer any other questions if you have. And also just wanted to leave you here too, that I am currently doing consultations as well, and would be happy to help any of you. You can just reach out to Patty, our client service manager, at the email below, or you can feel free to email me if you have questions as well. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is Sarah. Are there long-term studies on cannabis in elderly? The reason I ask is, this gabapentin, you can pull up on PubMed recent studies saying that it causes dementia, in patients.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They're using it to treat dementia. So, and you'll hear from kind of old school practitioners, well, it's quality of life, yada yada yada. But are there long-term studies like that? Is there an issue with cannabis and long-term studies causing dementia or increasing dementia in elderly?
No. I'm just clicking back here just so you can see the website. Where did that go? So no, I think what they're finding is that in some studies, or the study that I actually referenced in the presentation, the MIND study, from Dr. Stacy Gruber, they're actually finding, I mentioned in the slide that they're finding some improvements in cognition. Now, I know it's thought or has been seen
sure I'll
too
eat it.
that there's some that show loss of cognition, and I think those are the ones that are using very high THC. So you have to keep that in mind. You know, there are studies, I mean, you could Google, there are tons of studies that have been done that are really skewed negatively. They're kind of looking at the wrong things, but there are tons of studies though that you can find on projectcbd.org. I would definitely encourage you to check out that website. And, you know, cannabis has been legal in some form since 1996, you know, in California, and it's been used for that long. So there is a lot of information about it. And cannabis can't really be studied in the same way that our traditional medicines are studied. I mean, it's a plant. So you have to think about that too. So a lot of it is, yeah.
I just want to say one thing. I just want to give a quick plug too, because just a personal story real quick. So my mother has been, she has anxiety, but she had COVID. And so after COVID, somehow I just was spent time with her. So she had this horrible bout of anxiety where it was really debilitating. And we thought she had memory impairment. You know, I thought she had Parkinson's. We were freaking out. So her anxiety was really just debilitating. So we brought Rhiannon in at the time, and I was talking to my mom, and she was going to her doctor. That's what I wanted to point out. And her doctor was adding layers of antidepressants, which I didn't like at all. And then she added an antipsychotic. And that's when I really lost my mind. And I was like, absolutely not, Mom, you're not taking that. So, but I wanted to say this. So what she said to me at first, and Rhiannon knows this, is she said, I didn't want to tell, I said, Mom, have you ever considered cannabis? You know, Rhiannon's done this and I want you to talk to her. She's like, oh, well, now that you say that, I had tried some, and I have to tell you, it's really the only thing that's working. So I was like, oh my God. So I said, you know, you need to tell your doctor, like you need to talk to Rhiannon, we need to get things situated here. But I want to say, she said, I don't want anybody to think I'm a druggie. So, you know, that stigma for that generation to say that, I don't want anybody to think I'm a druggie. And I was like, Mom, come on. But, you know, that's what they think. So, but she did tell her doctor, and her doctor was receptive to it. And we did stop her from taking the antipsychotic. And I just spent a good amount of time with her. And we brought her cannabis to London. We were like, we don't know, we might get busted. My mom's like, I can't sleep without it. So I just wanted to tell you that it's really making a difference, and she's actually decreasing her antidepressants. She is sleeping so much better. She was taking something heavy for sleeping that I also hated. She's decreasing that. So I can tell you from my mother's experience, personal experience, it is working for her. So I just wanted to share that because it kind of covers everything that Rhiannon talked about. The stigma, talking to her doctor. She was so nervous. Her doctor would think she was a druggie, but no, her doctor was accepting. You know, we got her on the right stuff, on the right track, and she is so much better. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
So thank
All
you,
right.
everybody, for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody have any other questions before we close?
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, have a great night.
Thank you so much, Rhiannon.
Yeah, you're welcome. Take
Thanks.
care.